I got you. That's the phrase I think the Lord wants us to hear this weekend. I got you. So I love the water. I love to swim. Especially I love to be in the ocean and swimming in the ocean. Something about kind of fighting and dealing with the big waves and trying to see how much you can stand when a wave crashes into you, or trying to see how long you can ride a wave and body surf until the waves catch you and toss you around like a rag doll. Anyone who has experience with the ocean knows that you better have respect for it. If the water's too rough, you better stay clear. There's a specific kind of current in water, mostly found in oceans, but not just in oceans, that's called the riptide. A riptide is formed by the way waves break and come together, and it forms a channel, a current, in order for that water that comes onto shore to get it back out to the ocean. And a riptide, that current, can be extremely strong. It can also be extremely dangerous. Riptides kill around 100 people every year just in the United States. So more on these riptides in just a minute. First reading today is taken from the last chapter of the prophet Isaiah. In the last chapter here, the Lord, through the prophet Isaiah, is addressing the survivors of Israel, or the remnant. And from this remnant, from the survivors, or from those who are strong, the Lord sends out fugitives. And these fugitives are to go out to the corners, the farthest corners of the world, to those who have not heard of God, do not know God, and they're to share the good news. So the first reading this weekend from the prophet Isaiah really serves as a great backdrop or a background to our gospel today. We hear in the gospel that many will come from the east, the west, the north, and the south, and they're going to be gathered into this great banquet of the kingdom of God. And all of this is to highlight, we could say, Jesus' vision for salvation. It's best said or best summed up by St. Paul in his first letter to Timothy when he says, God desires all to be saved and come to the knowledge of truth. But despite God's universal saving will, salvation should not be taken for granted. Our tradition actually has a phrase for that. It calls it the sin of presumption. And the sin of presumption really runs rampant today, especially in the West. Especially, could even say here in America. The common thought in the West is, it doesn't really matter how one lives their life. When they die, they're in a better place, for sure. Regardless of how they live, maybe even with no regard whatsoever of having a relationship with Jesus or striving to follow the commandments, they're in a better place. Along kind of feeds into the mentality of you're okay, I'm okay, we're all okay, and we're all going to be okay. And Jesus in the gospel kind of very clearly addresses this maybe presumption of salvation. He gives kind of a somber image. That image is, he says, there will be many who will knock on the door, wanting to enter, but the Lord will say, I don't know you. Notice the surprise of those that are there knocking on the door. They're like, what do you mean? You don't know me. I ate with you. I drank with you. I heard you out on the streets preaching. I sat in that pew every week. Or at least on the weeks that it was convenient. And I made it. And Lord's response again was, I don't know you. Depart. Jesus also then turns and speaks clearly to the fact that salvation is not easy. And as I've said now numerous times here in my 2 years here, it's important for us to know and to understand that salvation is not earned. We can't merit it. We can't merit and earn what he did on the cross. We can't go up to heaven and say, look at all these good things that I've done, and this is my ticket into heaven. No. We can't earn our salvation, but it is clear that what we do or what we don't do is important, and God judges us by that. It's very much a sign of whether or not we're following him and know him. He goes on to say, with regard to salvation not being easy, he says, strive to enter through the narrow gate. For many, I tell you, will attempt to enter, but will not be strong enough. I think the Lord here, the last 2 years at least, and I think wants to continue to do, is for us here at Our Lady of Mercy is to make us strong, to make us a remnant, to go out to help those who are not strong enough. That's where we turn back to riptides. On July 14th, so just over a month ago now, a man by the name of Fred Pepperman and his family were on a vacation enjoying a day on a Florida beach. He's got 4 daughters. One of his daughters, who was out swimming, all of a sudden got caught in a riptide. 2 of his other daughters noticed that their younger sister was out there struggling in the water, so they went out to help her. But then they got stuck in the riptide. So Fred Pepperman, the father, notices now that his three daughters, and he notices their cries for help, and he swam out to go rescue his girls. Reaching the first 2 daughters, he was able to get them out, show them out of the riptide, and they made it back to shore. The 3rd daughter, it wasn't so easy. Fighting the waves and the current, both of them became weak. And finally, after reaching the last daughter, he worked tirelessly to keep his daughter's head above water. He was able to eventually free her. She made it back to shore. But in doing so, he died and drowned. The daughter's last words to her father were this: "Daddy, help me." To which he responded, the father's last words to his daughter was simply, "I got you." A riptide is unstable, it's fierce, and it can sometimes pull you under, sometimes causing you to drown. Life, real life, as we all know, is unstable. It's fierce, and it can sometimes pull us under to the point where we're drowning. And Jesus, he enters all of this. In fact, like Fred Pepperman, Jesus entered the unstable, fierce waters, this world, so as to save, to rescue, to deliver us from hopelessness, from emptiness, from despair, from sin, from death, from hell. And if we just stop for a minute and listen, we can hear all around us faint cries for help. And we can see people all around us going under, drowning, because the riptide out there is strong. And I'm convinced, we're convinced, Father Don and I, we're convinced that the Father's looking at this community here at Our Lady of Mercy and asking all of us this afternoon, who will go get them? Who will go in the waters after them? Who will extend their hand and say to them, "I got you, and this is the way out of the riptide"? For people who are drowning, The place to start is overwhelmingly as simple as telling people that their life is far more important, that their life matters far more than they could ever imagine. People are dying to hear that simple message. To be encouraged to pursue something meaningful. A place to start is to strive to enter through the narrow gate. That's something to work for. That's something to spend one's energy at, the fighting for, to enter through the narrow gate. This is especially the case for the youth. And for those, my generation, who are endlessly striving for things that are not meaningful at the end of the day. Striving for pleasure. And the very act of striving is what gives meaning. Striving for something as worthy and noble as the Lord's words today, strive to enter through the narrow gate. And above all, they're waiting to be encouraged to bet their life on Jesus. To commit wholeheartedly to the fact that God is someone who can be relied upon. And the way out of the riptide always involves a winsome proclamation of the gospel, the good news. What does that look like more concretely? The primary way we at Our Lady of Mercy give a winsome proclamation of the gospel to those who don't know God, to those who have fallen away, to those who don't know the reasons why to strive to enter the narrow gate, or maybe they've forgotten the reasons why and need to learn them again or to be reminded. The primary way we do that here is through Alpha. Alpha will be beginning again here in 3 weeks, 2 sessions a week, one on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, and one on Saturday mornings at 9:45. And Alpha is simply a meal followed by a video talk, which is just the bare essentials of the kerygma, of what the good news is, who Jesus is and why he matters and what he wants to do in my life. And then it's followed by a small group discussion. The challenge for all of us this week, or these next 3 weeks, the challenge for you, for me, is to invite someone to Alpha, to look around to see whose head is bobbing maybe above and below water. And maybe you go with them, you come with them to Alpha. But to enter the waters, to hold their head up and to say, I got you. He has you. Some of us, to be sure, this afternoon are here, maybe just happen to be here this weekend, happen to come to Mass on this weekend or to this church. And maybe for us, when we pause and listen to hear those faint cries, when we pause to look around to see who's drowning, when we pause, maybe we notice deep within us, our interior, maybe we hear that cry within ourselves. Maybe we notice it's our head that's bobbing above and below water right now. Maybe we've even begun to take on water. And the Lord wants to say to you this afternoon, I got you. And I'm not letting you go under. So we talked a couple weeks ago about priorities, and maybe those priorities have gotten messed up and God has slipped down on the priority list. We find ourselves maybe stuck or drowning. Maybe that invitation this afternoon to Alpha is for us. Jesus says the way of salvation involves a struggle. One must strive to enter the narrow gate, and not all will be strong enough. if you are strong enough to go in the waters and to take someone by the hand and to say, I got you, then do it. Because the waters are unstable. The waters are fierce. And people are drowning out there. And he is always the way out of the riptide.